Rio de Janeiro, September 1970. The Santa Teresa neighborhood woke slowly that Monday morning. The heat was already pressing at 8 a.m. The specific wet, clinging heat that Rio carries on the body like a second skin. On the cobblestone streets, vendors pushed carts loaded with mango, guava, and green coconut. Children ran down the steep alley that opened onto a small dirt square where a metal-roofed warehouse opened its wide doors to the morning. The warehouse had no name on the facade. It didn't need one. Everyone in Santa Teresa knew what happened there Monday through Saturday, from 7 to 11 in the morning. The exposed brick walls were covered with black and white photographs. Berimbaus hung from sisal ropes. A faded banner read, Capoeira, Angola, Tradition, Resistance, Honor. The polished cement floor carried the color of years of training, marks of bare feet, of softened falls, of ginga repeated until it became instinct. Outside, a yellow taxi climbed the steep street with difficulty and stopped in front of the warehouse. The driver looked through the window with a confused expression, as if certain there had been a mistake in the address. The passenger paid the fare, got out of the car slowly, and stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds. He looked at the warehouse. He looked at the banner. He heard the sound of the berimbau coming from inside. And he walked in. Her name was Valentina Reyes, 32 years old, 5'8", 163 pounds of muscle, trained since the age of 6 in the cultural Quilombo of Bahia, where capoeira was not a sport or a tourist show. It was survival coded in movement, survival that Africans had hidden inside dance so that the slave masters would not realize they were watching people train for war. Valentina had learned capoeira before she learned to read. Her master, Mestre Corvo, 68 years old, responsible for training more than 400 capoeiristas in 45 years of teaching, said she was the most complete student who had ever passed through his academy. It was not an easy compliment. Mestre Corvo did not give easy compliments. At 19, Valentina had won 4 consecutive capoeira regional challenges in Salvador, something no woman had done before. At 23, she had represented Brazil in Lisbon, where she left an audience of 400 people breathless with a sequence of movements that brought down 3 training partners in less than 35 seconds. At 27, she had moved to Rio and opened the Santa Teresa warehouse with money that took 7 years to save. 68 regular students, police officers, dock workers, university students. Valentina did not charge those who could not pay. She charged double those who could. Her capoeira was pure Angola, the oldest, the lowest, the most deceptive. Capoeira Angola does not go up. It goes down. The game happens close to the ground, with the body almost horizontal, arms supported, feet rotating at the level of the opponent's knees. Those who do not know it think it is dance. Those who have received a capoeira Angola sweep know it is not. Her philosophy was simple. The ground is the territory of capoeira. Any martial art that needs distance and verticality to function is lost when the game descends. She was right. In September 1970, Valentina Reyes had not lost a single challenge in 16 years of capoeira. 27 direct confrontations. Against capoeiristas from other schools. Against judokas. Against an amateur boxer who had underestimated the low sweep and woken up on the ground without understanding what had happened. 27, not one defeat. When the stranger walked through the warehouse gate that September morning, Valentina was in the center of the space, her back to the entrance, teaching the basic ginga to a group of beginners. She did not turn around immediately. The berimbau of Mestre Corvo, who played seated in a corner, stopped playing. The silence was the warning. The man who walked through the gate stood 5'7", 138 pounds, 63 kilograms, white short-sleeve shirt, simple black trousers, leather sandals, black hair neatly cut, slightly almond-shaped eyes, posture completely relaxed. The kind of posture that people confuse with laziness, but which is, in fact, the opposite. The body of someone who does not waste energy on unnecessary tension. He stopped in the center of the open gate and looked at the space with genuine curiosity. He looked at the berimbaus on the walls, at the photographs, at the students who had stopped training and were watching him. He smiled slightly. Not the smile of someone who wants to impress. The smile of someone who is seeing something they find beautiful. One of the oldest students, a 24-year-old sculptor named Marco, approached. "Can I help you?" The stranger answered first in English, then in broken Portuguese with an accent that mixed Cantonese and American. "I heard the berimbau down the street. I wanted to see." Marco looked at the others. A small laugh moved through the group of beginners. A tourist. Valentina turned around. She looked at the stranger from top to bottom with the objectivity of someone who had spent her entire life evaluating opponents. 63 kilograms. No visible musculature under the shirt. "Come in," she said, "but take off your shoes." The stranger removed his sandals without ceremony. He walked into the warehouse, stepping on the polished cement, and looked around as if he were in a museum. Mestre Corvo, from his corner, observed everything without saying anything. The old man saw something in the stranger's feet when he stepped on the ground. Something in the way the weight distributed, the way the toes settled on the surface. It was not the way of a tourist. But the old man stayed quiet. The stranger stood watching the training for about 20 minutes. He stood near the wall, arms crossed, observing the ginga, the bass movements, the rhoda that Valentina opened for the more advanced students. When the berimbau played, and two experienced capoeiristas entered the game, he leaned slightly forward, a detail that no one noticed except Mestre Corvo. After the rhoda, Valentina approached. "Where are you from?" she asked. "San Francisco," he said. "Do you train anything?" A pause of 2 seconds. "Something." "Yes." Marco laughed openly. Valentina did not smile. "Do you want to try?" she asked. It was not a friendly offer. It was an evaluation. The stranger looked at the empty rhoda in the center of the warehouse, looked at the berimbau in Mestre Corvo's hands, looked at Valentina. "Okay," he said. At that moment, Marco said out loud what everyone was thinking. "She'll put you down in 30 seconds, he said, laughing without malice, like someone announcing the obvious result of a simple equation. Valentina did not contradict him. The stranger looked at Marco, then looked at Valentina. 30 seconds is a long time, he said, and it was not clear in that moment whether he was agreeing or disagreeing. The rhoda opened. Mestre Corvo began to play the berimbau in a slow rhythm, the rhythm of Angola. That rhythm that seems gentle but hides the trap in the next beat. Two students clapped on the sides. The sound filled the metal warehouse, and the others stopped talking. Valentina entered the rhoda first. She began to ginga. The continuous movement of weight, hips, feet, that in Capoeira Angola is simultaneously a position of attack, defense, and observation. Her ginga was fluid, like breathing. There were 16 years of ginga in that movement. Every kilogram of force in the hips, every transfer of weight between the feet was automation built by hundreds of thousands of repetitions. The stranger entered the rhoda next, and here, the first thing that nobody expected happened. He did not ginga. He stood completely still, feet slightly apart, knees slightly bent, arms loose at the side of his body. No capoeira movement, no attempt to imitate the ginga. He stood still and looked at Valentina with absolute attention, as if the only object in the world were her body moving. Marco snorted. He doesn't even know how to ginga. Mestre Corvo stopped playing for half a second, then continued. Valentina advanced with the first sequence. The lateral roll, typical of Capoeira Angola, almost crawling, that throws the body to the side and positions the foot in a low arc to sweep the base of the opponent. It was an elegant, fast movement and extremely difficult to defend for anyone who does not know Capoeira, because the trajectory does not come from above like a conventional kick. It comes from the side and from below, from where eyes trained for conventional combat are not accustomed to looking. Valentina's foot passed 4 inches from the stranger's ankle. Passed. He had moved from the spot with a 15-inch lateral step, without jumping, without retreating, without any elaborate movement. 1 step. Just 1 step. At the exact moment, her foot arrived, as if he knew exactly where the foot would be before it arrived. Valentina recovered in half a second and looked at him. For the first time, her expression changed. Not much, just a small opening in the eyes. The first crack in 16 years of certainty. She had swept 27 opponents in 16 years. Not one of them had made her first sequence miss. This man had not blocked it, had not countered it, had simply not been there when it arrived. Valentina filed this information and advanced again, this time with the sequence that had brought down the amateur boxer 2 years before. Ginga to the right to attract the eye. Change of plane to the ground in a queda de rins. The movement where the capoeirista lowers the body almost to the ground laterally, supporting one hand, and from there fires a meia lua de compasso, the horizontal spinning kick that comes from below upward and strikes at the height of the opponent's knee or hip. No one who does not know the mechanics of the movement can defend against it, because the angle of attack does not exist in any other martial art. The leg rotates in the horizontal plane close to the ground in a radius of 180 degrees. The stranger saw the descent to the ground. He retreated 1 step. He saw the meia lua launching. He curved his torso backward at an angle that seemed physically impossible for someone of his build. And Valentina's foot passed under his chin with 2 inches of clearance. Silence in the warehouse. Mestre Corvo stopped playing. Valentina rose from the ground slowly. And for the first time in 16 years of capoeira, Valentina Reyes felt something she could not name in that moment, but which years later she would describe as the ground disappearing. It was not fear. It was recognition. What happened in the next 3 minutes was remembered in detail by each of the 19 people present in that warehouse until the end of their lives. Valentina attacked with everything. It was not carelessness. It was not anger. It was professionalism. The cold decision of an experienced fighter that this unknown opponent required maximum from the beginning. She entered with the complete sequence she used for her most serious challenges. Pure Angola Ginga to create rhythm, low negativa to force the opponent to look down, heel sweep to clear the support leg, immediate transition to the armada overhead in case the opponent tried to escape upward. A sequence of 4 chained movements in 2 simultaneous attack points, low and high, that left 0 escape space for any fighter who did not know specifically the grammar of Capoeira Angola. The problem was that the stranger did not use the grammar of any known martial art. He did not block. He did not jump. He did not retreat in a straight line. For each of Valentina's movements, there was a response that came from no manual, an evasion of such absolute efficiency that it seemed absurd. The smallest possible movement at the most precise possible moment, resulting in being exactly outside the reach of each attack, without wasting a single millimeter of energy. The stranger was reading Valentina's body, not the movements, the entire body, the feet, the hips, the shoulders, the neck. Advanced capoeiristas know that the secret of Capoeira Angola is that the next movement is already announced in the current movement. The body that descended for the negativa is already pointing to where the sweep will go. Those who can read that language can respond before the movement arrives. The stranger was reading that language in a martial art he had never studied, in real time, the first time he had ever seen it live. Marco had stopped talking. The students had stopped breathing. The sequence reached its fourth movement, the armada overhead, the high spinning kick that closes the exit for anyone who escaped the sweep below. A kick with the full force of a 163-pound woman's hip, rotated 180 degrees, directed at the opponent's temple. The stranger did something that no one could explain properly in the hours that followed. Instead of retreating, he advanced. He stepped inside the radius of the kick, closing the distance from 6 feet to 12 inches in half a step. And Valentina's leg passed past him without force, without target, like a sword that cut the wind. And then he was inside. 12 inches of distance. His face was at the level of her shoulder. His hands were open, one at the height of her elbow, one at the height of her wrist. Not holding, just positioned. She could no longer ginga. The space for capoeira to exist had disappeared. They stayed like that for perhaps 3 seconds. 3 seconds in which everyone in the warehouse held their breath. Then he took a step back, opened the space again, stood where he had been before, still, arms loose, looking at her. Mestre Corvo had stopped playing 40 seconds earlier. No one had asked him to stop. He had stopped because the berimbau was interfering with something that needed to be heard in silence. Valentina looked at the stranger for a long time. "Who taught you that?" she said. He thought for a second. "Water," he said. That single word hanging in the air of the warehouse. Not a style, not a master, not a school. Water. Mestre Corvo, in his corner, heard the word and closed his eyes for a moment. The old man had heard something that took him 68 years to understand, stated in a single word by a stranger who had walked in off the street 40 minutes earlier. What happened after that lasted 2 more hours? Valentina sent the students back to training and sat with the stranger at a wooden table in the corner of the warehouse. Mestre Corvo approached slowly and sat on the other side. The stranger's name was Bruce Lee, 29 years old, born in San Francisco, raised in Hong Kong, living in Los Angeles, actor, filmmaker, the creator of a martial arts system he had been developing for the past 12 years, from a premise that Capoeira Angola had reached by a different path 300 years earlier. That movement must be the response to movement, not the application of a pre-established form. Bruce had not arrived at the warehouse by accident. He was in Rio de Janeiro for film distribution meetings. He had 3 free days before the return flight and had asked the local producer, a carioca named Marcus Viana, to recommend a place where he could see real Brazilian martial art. Not for tourists. Marcus had given him the warehouse address. "Why did you walk in when you didn't know what was going to happen?" Valentina asked. "I always walk in when I don't know what's going to happen," Bruce said. "It's the only time you learn anything." Valentina looked at Mestre Corvo. The old man had that expression she knew well. The expression of someone agreeing with something they never put into words, but know is true. The conversation that followed was the densest conversation about martial art that Warehouse had ever held. Bruce asked about the negativa. Valentina demonstrated. Bruce watched 3 times, then tried. On the 4th attempt, he was doing it reasonably. On the 10th, he was doing it well. Marco, watching from a distance, said years later that it was the most disturbing thing he had seen in 30 years of capoeira. A stranger absorbing the central movement of capoeira Angola in 40 minutes without technical vocabulary, without formal instruction. Valentina asked about the entry Bruce had made, the step inside the radius of the kick, closing the distance instead of increasing it. In capoeira Angola, there was a similar concept called corpo fechado, the idea that sometimes the only way out is to move toward the danger instead of fleeing from it. But Bruce's execution had been different, more economical, without any extra movement. "You have no form," she said. It was not a criticism. It was an observation. "I have all the forms," he said. "That's why I don't need any specific one." Mestre Corvo, who had been silent for more than an hour, spoke for the first time. "It's what we call jogo limpo," he said. "When you have nothing to hide, the body becomes honest." Bruce looked at the old man for a long time, then said in English, because in Portuguese he could not find the exact word. "That's it. That's exactly it." Before leaving, Bruce asked to see the complete rota with the best students, without interruption. Valentina opened the rota. Mestre Corvo played for 40 minutes. Bruce stood in the corner of the warehouse with the absolute attention that had disconcerted everyone that morning. He took no notes. He did not photograph. He just watched. When it finished, he approached Valentina and said something she repeated in interviews and in classes during the 30 years that followed. "You discovered the same thing I did," he said, "only earlier." Valentina took 2 days to fully understand what he had said. When she understood, she went to speak with Mestre Corvo. The old man said, "I know. I saw it from the moment he stepped on the floor." To understand what happened in that warehouse, to understand it truly, not just as an anecdote but as a principle, it is necessary to understand what Bruce Lee had been developing in the years before that September morning. The system he called Jeet Kune Do was not a martial art in the conventional sense. Conventional martial arts are systems of forms. Each system has a vocabulary of movements that the practitioner masters through repetition until they become automatic. The problem that Bruce had identified with clinical precision while still in his 20s was that forms also create prisons. Karate knows how to block from top to bottom. Judo knows how to unbalance with weight. Capoeira knows how to attack from below and from unexpected angles. Each system is excellent within its own vocabulary and vulnerable outside it. Bruce had dedicated 12 years to building a system that did not depend on vocabulary. The honest expression of the individual. The movement that the moment requires without the mediation of a learned form. To get there, he had studied everything. Western boxing, European fencing, Greco-Roman wrestling, Thai kickboxing. He had filmed movements in slow motion, measured angles, calculated force vectors, and he had arrived at a conclusion that Capoeira Angola had arrived at by a different path 300 years earlier. Capoeira Angola was born in Brazil between the 15th and 17th centuries, created by enslaved Africans who needed to train combat without the slave masters realizing it was combat. The solution was to hide the martial art inside dance. The attack movement looks like dance. The defense looks like play. The entire system is built on ambiguity. You never know for certain whether the next movement is a strike or an evasion or a trap. The form of Capoeira Angola is not a fixed form. It is a form that simulates having no form. That is why Mestre Corvo stopped playing when he saw Bruce step on the floor. He recognized the principle. Two completely different paths had arrived at the same place. The idea that the greatest freedom in a confrontation is to have no form that the opponent can anticipate. Water has no form. Water takes the form of the container. You cannot trap water because it has no form to be trapped. Capoeira. Angola had discovered this through the necessity of surviving slavery. Bruce had discovered it through 12 years of systematic study. Valentina had spent 16 years being the best within her territory. And on that September morning, a 138-pound man had walked into her territory and made the territory disappear. Not with greater force, not with superior technique, but with the complete absence of fixed vocabulary. This was not defeat. It was demonstration. There is a final part of this story worth telling. That same afternoon, Bruce returned to his hotel in Leblon. In the notebook he always carried, a black-covered notebook that is today in the archive of the Bruce Lee Foundation in Los Angeles, there is an entry dated September 1970 with 4 lines in English. Rio de Janeiro, Capoeira, Angola. I found the ground today. The ground is the place where everything begins and where everything ends. I needed to come to Brazil to see what I already knew. And below, in larger letters, a sentence not explained in any other entry. Valentina knows. The old man knows too. They got there first. Mestre Corvo died in 1991, still playing berimbau on Monday mornings. His students say that in his final years, when asked what had been the strangest moment of his life, he always gave the same answer. A morning when a thin man walked through the warehouse gate, carefully removed his sandals, and stepped on the capoeira floor, as if he already knew what he was going to find there. I saw it in his feet, the old man would say. Feet that know the ground have no hurry. His feet had no hurry at all. Valentina Reyes taught capoeira in Santa Teresa for 30 more years. She trained more than 500 students, never lost a challenge. In a 1989 interview for a martial arts magazine published in Sao Paulo, she was asked about the most important moment of her career. She answered, "A September morning in 1970, when a 138-pound man taught me that I did not know everything about the ground." The journalist asked what she had learned specifically. She thought for a moment, then said, "I learned that when you master a territory, you stop seeing what is outside it. And what is outside is where the real game happens." The journalist asked if she had won the confrontation. "There was no confrontation," she said. "There was a conversation. I just didn't know that when I started." What that September morning in 1970 in Santa Teresa has to tell us goes far beyond martial art. It goes beyond the confrontation between two styles of combat, two countries, two traditions. What happened in that metal-roofed warehouse smelling of cement and berimbau, with 19 people in silence around a rota that stopped being a rota and became a conversation, is something that happens rarely in anyone's life. It is the moment when you find someone who arrived at the same place as you by a completely different path. And when that happens, there is no defeat. There is no victory. There is recognition. Valentina had spent her life building excellence within a territory. Bruce had spent his life building excellence that depended on no territory. And on the morning they met, what remained was not the memory of who was better. What remained was the memory that two different systems of seeking the truth had arrived at the same conclusion. The most perfect movement is the one that does not announce what it will be. Capoeira, Angola says, "Deceive to survive." Bruce Lee said, "Be water." Water deceives because it has no form to be anticipated. The language was different. The truth was the same. Bruce Lee died in July 1973, 3 years after that September morning. He was 32 years old. In the notebook. In the 4 lines dated September 1970. In the sentence written in larger letters at the bottom. Valentina knows. The old man knows too. They got there first. He knew what he had found on that polished cement floor, among the berimbaus and the photographs, and the 19 people who would spend the rest of their lives trying to describe it. He had found the ground, and the ground has no hurry. It was always going to be there, waiting for someone who already knew what to do when they arrived.